We often hear that neural networks learn from their mistakes, but what does that actually mean? It's not magic, you know. When a network gets an answer wrong, there's a very specific algorithm that kicks in to fix it. That algorithm is called backpropagation.
Okay, just think about a modern neural network for a second. It can have millions, sometimes even billions of these little connections, or weights that can be tuned. So when it makes a mistake, how in the world does it figure out which one of those millions of connections is to blame? It seems like an impossible task, but by the end of this, you'll see just how elegant the solution really is.
So how do you solve a problem like that? Well, the trick isn't to check every single connection one by one. I mean, that would take forever. The solution is way, way smarter. It starts at the end with the mistake itself, and then it works backward. So, first things first, the network does what we call a forward pass. You feed it some data, say an image, and that data flows all the way through the network's layers. Each connection adjusts the signal just a little bit, and at the very end, an answer pops out. That's the network's prediction. But what happens if that prediction is just wrong? Let's say we showed it a picture of the number 8, but it predicted it was a 3. The difference between what it said and what it should have said, that's our error. We use something called a loss function to measure just how big that error is. A big error means we need a big fix. A small error, just a tiny tweak.
And this brings us right back to that huge question. Which of those millions of connections is actually responsible for the error? In machine learning, this is called the credit assignment problem. How do you assign the blame or the credit to each tiny little component in this massive, complex system?
And the solution, as I mentioned, is to work backwards. It's kind of like being a detective. You don't start a case by interviewing everyone in the city, right? No, you start at the crime scene, the error, and you trace the evidence back from there.
So the algorithm looks at that final layer of weights first and calculates how much each of them contributed to that final mistake. Then it takes a step back to the layer before that and does the exact same thing. This process of assigning blame just keeps propagating backward, layer by layer, all the way to the very beginning of the network.
Now, this whole idea of working backward isn't just some clever little trick. It's a formal and incredibly efficient algorithm. It's called backpropagation, which is really just short for the backward propagation of error. And it all works in a simple 4-step loop. Step 1 is the forward pass, where the network makes its guess. Step 2, we use the loss function to calculate the error. Step 3, the backward pass, where blame gets assigned to every single weight. And finally, step 4, the weights are updated to hopefully do better next time. This loop just repeats over and over thousands, maybe millions of times.
That last step, updating the weights, is handled by another process, usually gradient descent. You can think of it like this. If backpropagation tells you which direction to turn each dial, gradient descent tells you how far to turn it. The classic analogy is being lost in a foggy valley. To get to the bottom, you just find the steepest path downhill and take a small step. That step is gradient descent, moving the whole network towards a lower error.
So why is this whole algorithm so important? Well, in one word, efficiency. Just imagine trying to do this with brute force. For a model with 1,000,000 weights, you'd have to tweak each one by one, and then rerun the entire network just to see if it helped. That's over 1,000,000 separate passes.
Backpropagation does the exact same thing in just 2 passes. 1 pass forward to see the error, and 1 pass backward to calculate the blame for every single weight. That's it. This efficiency isn't just a nice to have. It's the very thing that makes training these huge deep neural networks possible at all.
All right, so let's talk about how this actually powers the AI we see all around us. Because this isn't some abstract theoretical idea. It is the engine behind almost all of modern deep learning.
Backpropagation is the standard way we train models for image classification. Everything from the classic handwritten digit problem all the way to the complex vision systems in self-driving cars. It's at the core of natural language processing, and it's exactly how today's large language models are trained. If a machine has learned to do something complex, you can be pretty sure backpropagation was the teacher.
So, to put it simply, backpropagation is the elegant, efficient process of a machine learning from its mistakes.
The key thing to remember here is that deep learning isn't just random trial and error. It's a very systematic process of assigning blame and making targeted, intelligent corrections. And that leaves us with a final thought. If a machine can learn so effectively by tracing its errors, what does that tell us about how we should design other complex learning systems?